Hello and welcome to my YouTube. This YouTube is remembering the year 1935. Here's your quiz. Name two major events that happened in 1935. If you're like me, you can't answer this. I couldn't have told you two major things that happened in 35, and I dare say if I ask 100 Americans between the ages of 20 and 50, nobody will probably be able to answer that question. We just don't remember, or we didn't study 1935. There's a famous saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And that was a Spanish philosopher that said that in 1905. Hi, I'm your host. I'm Maury Reese. I'm 81 years old. I'm a former naval officer, former high school teacher, former college teacher, and I spent 30 years with Apple as a senior executive. Now that I'm retired, I have lots of time, and so that's why I put together these Remember the Years. And I've done everything from 1940 up to 1982. And about 3 million people have watched them, so I just keep doing them. I hope you enjoy this. In 1935, Franklin D. Roosevelt was President of the United States. The population of America was 127 million. Today it's 340 million, so think about that. That means there were only 1/3 as many people in America as there are today. So think of it this way. Go on your street and get rid of 2/3 of the people. Go in your town and get rid of 2/3 of the people. Go in your school classroom and get rid of 2/3 of all the students. There were just not as many people back then as there are now. On January 11th, Amelia Earhart became the first person to fly solo from Hawaii to California. On January 16th, the FBI kills the Baker gang, which included Ma Baker, who was supposedly the shootout. This gang robbed banks and kidnapped people. This is a wanted poster. They shot a sheriff in a town in Missouri, so they offered a reward for their capture. Anyway, the FBI gunned them down in a famous gun battle. On February 13th, Richard Hauptmann is convicted and sentenced to death for the Lindbergh baby kidnapping. This was the baby of Charles Lindbergh, one of the most famous men in America. And this guy kidnapped their baby, who later died before the child was returned. On February 22nd, airplanes are banned from flying over the White House. You had all of these biplanes that like to buzz over the White House, so they passed a new rule. You can't fly over the White House. On March 16th, Adolf Hitler announces Germany is going to rearm, and this is in violation of the 1919 Treaty of Versailles, which limited the size of the German army and Navy and Air Force. So because of this, by the late 30s, Hitler had one of the most powerful armies and navies and air forces in all of Europe, and that began World War II. On March 19th, a race riot breaks out in Harlem after a rumor circulates that a teenage Puerto Rican shoplifter in the Kresge Company had been brutally beaten. On March 22nd, the world's first regular television program is transmitted from the Berlin Radio Tower in Berlin, Germany. There were no TV stations whatsoever in America in 1935. On April 14th, the Great Black Sunday Dust Storm hits hardest in eastern New Mexico and Colorado and western Oklahoma. The Dust Bowl was ravaging the Midwest United States. during the mid-1930s. On April 16th, Fibber McGee and Molly debuts on NBC Radio, and this radio show was popular for many, many years into the 1940s. On May 6th, an Executive Order 7034 creates the Works Progress Administration, the WPA, part of the New Deal program to put unemployed Americans back to work. This, of course, was the Great Depression. On May 13th, T.E. Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia, is involved in a motorcycle accident in England, resulting in his death a few days later. So there really was a Lawrence of Arabia, and this is what the real man looked like. Of course, Peter O'Toole later played him in the movie. On May 21st, the first nighttime Major League Baseball game is played between the Cincinnati Reds and the Philadelphia Phillies at Crosley Field in Cincinnati. So nighttime baseball began in 1935. On May 30th, eventual baseball Hall of Famer Babe Ruth appears in his last career game, playing for the Boston Braves in Philadelphia, and they were playing against the Phillies. On May 31st, 20th Century Pictures and Fox Film Corporation combine to form 20th Century Fox Film Corporation, and that's what we have today. You've seen this logo at the beginning of many, many movies. On June 10th, Alcoholics Anonymous is founded in Akron, Ohio. On July 16th, the world's first parking meters are installed in Oklahoma City. On August 14th, U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt signs the Social Security Act into law. So Social Security goes all the way back to 1935. On August 15th, humorist Will Rogers and aviator Wiley Post are killed when Post's plane crashes shortly after takeoff near Barrow, Alaska. Wiley Post was the first man to fly around the world solo. On September 2nd, the strongest hurricane ever to strike the United States makes landfall in Upper Florida Keys, killing 423 people. It's rated as a Cat 5 with 185-mile-an-hour winds. Look at this. It blew an entire train off its tracks. On September 8th, Carl Weiss fatally wounds Huey Long, a U.S. Senator from Louisiana, nicknamed the Kingfisher, in a shooting at the Louisiana Capitol building in Baton Rouge. On September 13th, American aviator Howard Hughes, flying the Hughes H-1 Racer, sets an airspeed record of 352 miles an hour. On September 30th, President Franklin Roosevelt dedicates the Hoover Dam. On October 1st, the house called Falling Water in southwestern Pennsylvania, which was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, is completed. A little footnote. Just a few weeks ago, I read that they're making repairs to this house because it's leaking. So, who was born way back in 1935? You oldsters out there, will know many of these names. Floyd Patterson, heavyweight boxing champion a couple of times. When I was growing up as a teenager, he was the heavyweight champion for a while. Elvis Presley, need I say more? Born in 1935. Sonny Bono, of the Sonny and Cher duo. Gene Vincent, the singer, recorded one of my favorite songs, Bee-bop-a-loo-ah, she's my baby. Bee-bop-a-loo-ah, I don't mean maybe. Gene Vincent. Herb Alpert formed a little group called Tijuana Brass. Robert Conrad, good-looking actor. Steve Lawrence, singer. Big hit, Go Away Little Girl was one of his biggest songs. The actress, singer, director, businesswoman Diane Carroll. Nominated for all kinds of awards. Academy Awards, Tony Awards, Oscars, you name it. She either won it or was nominated. Jerry Lee Lewis. Great balls of fire, whole lot of shaking going on. Johnny Mathis. Beautiful voice. Chances are it's not for me to say, and Misty. Little story. I was on a business trip and I was in a hotel in Denver, Colorado, and I got up about 5:30 one morning to go down to breakfast, and there was only one other person in the hotel restaurant, one guy. And I looked at him and I thought he looked familiar, and so when my waitress came, I said, is that who I think it is? And she says, yeah, that's Johnny Mathis. So Johnny and I had breakfast together, sort of. The actress and director Woody Allen, born back in 1935. The TV host Phil Donahue had a very popular show on TV for years and years. So what were the most popular radio shows in 1935? Major Beau's Amateur Hour was number one, most popular radio show in America. Can't say that I ever heard it. I was born in 1944, so this was 9 years before I was born. Jack Benny program. Well, I certainly know Jack Benny. He migrated from radio to TV and movies. Rudy Valley, the Fleshman Yeast Hour. The Maxwell House Show Boat variety show. And Fred Allen's Town Hall Tonight. Here you see on this particular show he had Orson Welles as his guest. So what was introduced or invented back in 1935? Well, Social Security. The first canned beer in a can, Kruger's was its name. The Arid deodorant came out way back then. The garbage disposal that fit under the sink, introduced by General Electric. Kit Kat candy bar. Nylon was invented in 1935, and of course, nylon hose soon followed. Kodachrome film came out way back in 35. Preparation H. For all of you people who suffer from hemorrhoids, I had no idea this thing went all the way back to there. The paper shredder was basically invented in 1935. Originally, the first one was a hand crank, but he quickly put a motor on it. A little background here. It was invented by a guy in Germany, and he was writing these anti-Nazi papers, and he needed to destroy them, so he invented a paper shredder to destroy the anti-Nazi papers that he was writing. He didn't want to be arrested by Hitler's stormtroopers. The Wonder Bra was introduced back in 1935. The game Monopoly first appeared way back then. And this is an actual photograph of the very first original game board. Hasn't changed much, has it? Jockeys, shorts, men's briefs. So who won the Academy Awards in 1935? Well, the best actor was Clark Gable in the movie It Happened One Night. And you're going to see a pattern here. The best actress, Claudette Colbert in It Happened One Night. And the outstanding production, It Happened One Night. They didn't have Best Picture, so they had this category called Outstanding Production. So It Happened One Night swept the 5 biggest Oscars. What were the top grossing movies back in 1935? Which ones made the most money? Number 1 moneymaker, Mutiny on the Bounty, starring Charles Laughton and Clark Gable. Second biggest moneymaker, Top Hat, starring Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. Nobody danced like those two. Third big money maker, China Seas, starring Clark Gable and Jean Harlow. Number 4, Broadway Melody of 1936. I found this so amazing. This is a 1935 movie, but the title is Broadway Melody of 1936, starring Jack Benny, Robert Taylor, Eleanor Powell, and David Copperfield, starring W.C. Fields. One of my favorite little jokes that he told is he said, I inherited a fortune from my father when he passed away, and I spent most of it on wine, women, and song, and the rest I spent foolishly. The average annual salary in 1935 was $1,500. Let me convert that into our dollars today so you can see what that would really be like. That was $34,337. That's pretty pathetic, my friends. Right now in the United States, the average salary is somewhere around $70,000. So people didn't make much. Life was tough in 1935. The cost of a new car in 1935 was $8,503. This is a new Ford. In our dollars, that is a $19,457 car. The average car in America today is somewhere between $38,000 and $42,000. Cost of a new home in 1935 was $2,400. In our dollars today, that's still only a $56,000 home. The average new home in America today costs close to $400,000. So houses were cheap. A gallon of gas back then cost 19 cents. That sounds like it's really cheap. Not really. Let me show you what it is. That is $4.35 in our dollars. That's expensive gas. And they didn't get much mileage either. So thanks for watching. I hope you learned something new about life in 1935. Be well, my friends.